Hi everybody, I am Emmanuel Foley. I'm an MD and PhD candidate. Today we'll be talking about neglected zoonotic disease, a case of bovine tuberculosis. The objective of this presentation is basically to understand the prevalence of bovine tuberculosis, how it is transmitted, some of the control measures that are put into place, and then to also understand the economic losses and then the public health impact that come into play. So as a background, we hear a lot about neglected tropical diseases, but less often do we hear about neglected zoonotic diseases. They are nothing than just a category of zoonotic diseases that put great financial burden and public health concern. They are put into A classes, but for the sake of this presentation, we only focus on bovine tuberculosis. As the name implied, there is little to no support for these neglected diseases because they are well controlled in the developed country, and then pharmaceutical companies are less interested in putting money into research. But nevertheless, there's still a huge problem in developing countries, in Africa, Asia, as well as in some North American countries. So tuberculosis causes a huge burden for people, and it affects about 3.5 million people worldwide. And then we know it's caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis complex, the complex of 5 species, but the major one is Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and then followed by Mycobacterium bovis, which account for 3% of the 3.5 million cases worldwide. So bovine tuberculosis is just a chronic disease that affects animals, and it's caused by Mycobacterium bovis. And then the disease can affect practically all mammals, but most importantly, we find that in cattle. So this is transmitted. How it is basically transmitted from by inhaling infected droplets that expel from an infected lung, and this can be from an animal and from human as well. And then human also can get that through consumptions of raw milk, and then the consumptions of bushmeat, infected bushmeat, which is still pretty prominent in some of the countries in Africa. And then, as we know, tuberculosis takes long enough to manifest itself fully. It takes months to years to come out. And then the same for bovine tuberculosis. So some of the clinical features that we look for are weaknesses, weight loss, diarrhea, fever, coughing, loss of appetite, and a large lymph node. So how do we diagnose this? Well, basically 2 basic methods that we do is by isolating the mycobacteria and then putting that in a selected culture media, and then we can now use some of the DNA analysis, such as PCR, to confirm yes, indeed there is an infection or not. And then we can also use some of the tuberculin tests where we inject an individual with antigen, and then we ask the person to come back after 72 hours, and then we can now examine if the person is positive or not. So what the population iris? Well, in developing countries, as we know, people live in close proximity with livestock, and it's usually most of the time in the rural area. So those people are very much at high risk. And then we also have dairy farmers as well, they are at high risk. And then anybody that can come in contact with infected animal or human. So why should we be concerned? Well, we should be concerned first because anything that involves power should be a great concern for public health professionals. And then we also should be concerned because there is economical losses that come into play as well. As we can see, in the UK alone, it costs about £100 million for the program. And now you can think about the developing country where they even have more financial burden. So in Rwanda, in Nigeria, and Ethiopia, you can see statistically that this is still a huge problem in Africa. And then what is not surprising is about 90% of milk consumed in Africa are unpasteurized. So this causes a huge problem for public health. So the preventive measure and then some of the care management, basically by using control, TB control test, and then if the animal is infected, just eliminate the animal. And then we can also use some of the meat inspection measure and increase surveillance, like on visits at the farm, and then encouraging, the consumption of pasteurizing milk. Although many people think it doesn't taste well or it's very expensive, but nevertheless, we still have to encourage the consumption of pasteurized milk. And then there is no vaccine right now into play. So the only measure that we can come here is by educating, those farmers, like, hey, if you see this kind of symptom coming up, please just let us know. let's isolate the animal so it doesn't, it doesn't affect other people, or it doesn't affect other animals. So these are my references that I use, and then I thank you so much for listening to me, and then thank you.